Welcome to the session. The session title is AppStudio for ArcGIS, Quick Guide for JavaScript Developers. My name is Erwin Sukianto. I am the product engineer in AppStudio for ArcGIS team, and I have one of my coworkers here today, Loye Jumban. Loye is a software development engineer in the AppStudio for ArcGIS team as well. Before we start, let me get a quick consensus. How many of you here consider yourself a web developer or JavaScript developer? Almost all of you. How many of you have used or heard about AppStudio for ArcGIS? About half. So today we are going to show you a quick introduction in AppStudio and how can a JavaScript developer or web developer migrate into creating native apps in AppStudio for ArcGIS. So as we can see, this is AppStudio. The agenda for today is a quick introduction for AppStudio, an overview of a QML and the role of JavaScript in AppStudio. And also we're going to cover a few similarities between the JavaScript in HTML and the JavaScript in a language called QML that we use in AppStudio. Also, we are going to cover the difference between the JavaScript in QML and the JavaScript in HTML. Sounds good? All right. So, if I were to put AppStudio into one slide and a quick 2-minute introduction, what I would say is AppStudio is a suite of collection of tools. It's a combination of a lot of tools, productivity tools, that will help you to create native apps. One of the selling points that we have in AppStudio is that you write one code that will work across the platform, meaning iOS, Android for phone and tablet, Windows 2, and also it works on the desktop for Linux, Mac OS, and also Windows. AppStudio provides a lot of templates that's available, ready to use. The codes is shared to you. You can just take it, put your webmap ID, layers, and it's ready to go. We're going to show you a little bit about that later too. And also, AppStudio have a lot of plugins that would help you access this native capability in your phone, such as local notification, vibration, text-to-speech, biometric authentication, the Touch ID, the fingerprint Touch ID, and the Face ID for the new iPhone, secure storage, background location, and a lot more. Also, on top of that, AppStudio has a lot of other tools that will help you with testing and also building. One of them is called AppStudio Player, where you can quickly test your apps. So for example, in the web, you quickly create your app and then you see it in the browser. So AppStudio created something called Player, that you can put on your phone or on your desktop or tablet. You quickly create your code and then push it to your player and then see how it looks like. There's also a console window and for debugging, and also there is a tool called CloudMake. So this is the tool that would help you to build the code base so that it can be used in across platform. So basically, you write the code, put it in the CloudMake that we have. It has a lot of server with all of this platform. It will give you back the executable for each platform. It'll give you guys back the executable for Windows, IPA for iOS, and then APK for Android, for example. So keep going. A little bit about development stack of AppStudio. So if you can see here, on the very top, those are all the apps that's created using AppStudio. And then underneath that, it uses something called AppStudio App Framework that will give you the capability of the native app functionality, camera, vibration, notification, and all of that. And it also has the power of ArcGIS Runtime API for Qt. So basically, all of the functionality that available from runtime Qt QML can be added and used in AppStudio apps. So it brings the power of the mapping and the GIS into your app. You can also not use it, but you can. And underneath that, we are using this technology called Qt Quick Framework that consists of a QML, JavaScript, and C++. And underneath the runtime, it uses the REST API, feature services, map, and packages. So let's start. Let's start with the overview of the QML and where is the JavaScript in the QML. So QML stands for Qt Meta Language. Qt is a company that created this technology for a cross-platform native application. So the language that we use called QML. It's a JavaScript-based declarative language for writing UI, user interface. So let's get going to show you quickly. So the QML construct the UI, and the JavaScript construct the application logics. Sounds familiar, right? If you are in the web, HTML create the UI, and JavaScript does the application logic. Still similar. So here's a sample easy code in QML. So you can see that it has an import. And also, another thing, if you're a C# or JSP, Java server page, so the QML is the XAML and also the JSP part, basically. So we import Qt Quick, Qt Control, so that we can use the libraries that's provided by Qt company. If you can see that it's just, we specify that we want a rectangle with an ID app that has a width 400 and the height 400. It has a background color of green, and inside the rectangle, it has a button that says change color. And it anchors to the center, and on the on-click event, this is where you put your JavaScript code is. It is the same way you do it in the web, right? On the on-click event on a button, that's where you put your logic. For the simplicity, we're just simply saying that if you click that button, the color will change from green to red, red to green, green to red. So we say Qt color, if it's equal to green, then change it to red. If it is not, change it back to green. So pretty easy, right? So let's get going. So first, I want to talk about what's similar between the JavaScript in HTML and the QML. But before we start, we're going to show you a quick demo on how is it similar.
Thank you. Thanks, Erwin. Can you hear me? Okay. So Erwin has given you an overview of AppStudio, and he has also shown you one way in which you can use QML, JavaScript in QML. So I want us to look at more code in a moment. But before we do, let me give you a brief walkthrough of AppStudio, the desktop tool, for those who have not used it before. So when you open AppStudio, this is what you see. This is the dark theme. So this is the dark theme. And you can change the theme depending on your preference. If you click on the preference button, you can switch to a light theme, but I like working on the dark theme. So when you launch AppStudio for the first time, you're not going to have any apps. Right now, I have a gallery of 3 apps. So to create a new app, you will click on the New App button, and this presents you with 5 templates, 5 tabs. The first tab is the Starter tab. You will choose an option from this if you want to write your code from the ground up. The second tab shows you the 3 templates that Erwin mentioned, the Map Tour, Map Viewer, and Quick Report. These are apps that have been written and are customizable, so you can easily brand them to your liking. The third tab has the layout. These are UI layouts, UI designs that you can pick from. For example, if you want to start your app, a template that has a menu design, that is one where you click the menu button and it opens from the side. You will start from this right here. The next tab is the samples tab. This is my favorite tab. I like this tab because whenever I am writing apps and I come across a problem, most of the problems I encounter have already been solved here. For example, if I want to add biometric authentication in my app, I will start with this sample. This gives me a summary of what it is and a detailed description. If you cannot find what you're looking for because there are many samples, you can also use the search tab. So the last tab is the enterprise tab, and this has full-fledged apps. For example, if you want Survey 123, one of Esri's products, the source code for that app is available for you on AppStudio Desktop. So for a more detailed walkthrough of AppStudio, I would like to invite you, please visit our booth. I will be there, or someone can give you a walkthrough of a typical workflow involving writing your apps, testing them, and building them for distribution. So let's get into the code. The first sample I want to show you is this one right here, change base map samples. And my goal as I show you this is I want to tell you the 4 ways in which you can add JavaScript code in QML. So let's look at the sample. Let's see what it does. So I double click to run it. It does 2 things. You must have guessed the first by now. If I click the change base map button, it's going to change the base map of my scene view. So when I click, it changes. What I have in the back, in my JavaScript code, I have a list of 8 different base maps. And each time I click, it makes a random selection. The second thing my sample does is, when I change the width of the app, I reach a width where it tells me the width is too wide. So we are going to look at how this is done in the code. So notice I have a scene view. This is 3D. And you will see in a second how few lines of code I wrote to achieve this. So this is it. This is a sample. So the first thing I want you to notice is, as with all languages, you first import the libraries that you need. The first 4 imports are the Qt Quick, bringing in the Qt libraries to your app. This, for example, is bringing in the basic types such as text and rectangle. The next import is the ArcGIS.app framework. This is what brings AppStudio specific libraries to your app. So if you need to use plugins like biometric authentication, if you want to use promises or secured storage, those are not exposed by Qt, but are available in AppStudio. And the next import, this is the ArcGIS runtime import. This is what brings this exposes ArcGIS to your app. So this import right here, the next one, js.demo, this is one of interest to us. This is the first way in which you can bring your JavaScript code into QML. Just as in the web, you import JavaScript files in the header, you also import your JavaScript files in QML, and you import them with a namespace. In this case, I am using my functions. So if I want to call a method from this file, I will call it as myfunctions dot the name of the method. That is what I have done right here. So right here, I'm calling a random method myfunctions.random. So let's take a look at the structure of the QML code. Notice it is JSON-like, where you have an object that has attribute and value pairs. And you can, one thing I want you to note is, this is the root object. In HTML, your root object is always the HTML tag. But in QML, any object can be, any visual object can be your root object. In this case, I have a rectangle, which is my container. And in the rectangle, I have, so let me run this one more time so that we identify the 5 UI components that are in the sample. So to run, I will do Shift, Alt, and R. That's the shortcut. So the first thing we have is a container. In our container, we have a blue header. That's the second. The third thing is a button. The button that when I click, it changes the base map. And then fourth, I have a scene view with a scene. And the fifth visual component is the text. So let's identify those 5 components. First is the rectangle, which is my container. My header, the blue header, is this toolbar right here. You can see I gave it a color of steel blue. And in my header, I have a button. This is the button that when I click, it changes the base map. The fourth is the scene view, which has a scene. And I use anchors to position the scene view. Anchors in QML allow you to position objects relative to the parent or the sibling. In this case, I am positioning it at the bottom of the header. I am positioning the top of the scene view at the bottom of the header, the left to the left of the parent, right to the right of parent, and to the bottom of the parent. So let's take a look at what happens when I click the button. So as with the web, the button has an onClicked event. And when that button is clicked, that is where you can write your JavaScript code. That is the second place where you can write JavaScript code in QML, inside events. In this case, what I'm doing is, when the button is clicked, I have a list of base map names. And from that list, I make a random pick. With that random pick, I create a new base map using the ArcGIS runtime method, create object, and assign it to the scene's base map. So this is the scene. The scene has a property base map, and that is what I change when the button is clicked. This is another important thing I want to mention about QML, the fact that you can create your components on the fly. You don't have to instantiate them all the time as is done here. So just as in the web, you can create HTML tags, you can also create your QML objects when you need them. So the third way, so we've seen 2 ways how you can add JavaScript code to QML. The third way you can do that is by creating a method, a function, inside the QML object. In this case, I have a function called random pick, and I have created it inside my root object. And this is the function that makes a random pick based from an array. And the fourth way that you can add JavaScript is by binding it, as done here. So in this case, this is the text that appears when you resize the app. I am binding the width of the text, the width of the app, to the visibility of the text. So what I'm saying is, if the width of the app passes 520, then show the text. This is property binding, and in order to achieve this in other languages, you need to write many more lines of code than just one line. So that's it for this section. So just remember, we've talked about 4 ways in which you can add JavaScript to QML. The first is you import your JavaScript files. The second, you can write them in event handlers. Thirdly, you can create JavaScript functions in in QML objects. And fourthly, you can bind JavaScript expressions to properties of QML.
So how many of the web developer thinks that you guys can start coding in QML already? We're going to talk about that, but the answer to the question is, can you import an MD module, or what type of JavaScript file that you can import? The answer to the question is, it's just a plain JavaScript functionality with no DOM or anything, no frameworkless JavaScript. So let's continue. So as we have seen in the demo, the similarity between the JavaScript on the web and the JavaScript in the QML is the JavaScript environment that is being used in the QML is based on the ECMA 262, the ES language 5 standard. It supports all the primitive types, numbers, string, and then all of the global property of the function are available in the QML. So basically, just the basic JavaScript are available based on the ES version 5. Next. So both, as we all know, HTML and QML are both declarative language. It describes what to do. And imperative in the JavaScript, for example, show you how you can do it. Let's say if you want to create a rectangle, let's say I want a rectangle with the width and height of 200 and 500. And then on the other hand, on the JavaScript, it tells you exactly, I want to create a canvas with this line to this line so that you can create a rectangle. And it has a similar testing experience. So you can do instant testing. As we mentioned before, you write a code in your text editor, Sublime or Notepad++, and then you show it in the web browser. And for AppStudio, you can show it in the AppStudio player. So you quickly push it to the cloud and then look at it on your phone, on the player, or even on your desktop. You can also use the console.log. And AppStudio provide this additional tool so that you have the similar experience with the AppStudio player, the console window, and a lot of other tools. So those are the similar things, but there are differences. So let's talk about that. So first of all, there is no DOM in QML. So if you write in a web, document.select element by ID, for example, right? But so there's no DOM in QML, so you cannot use jQuery, Dojo, for example. But selecting object in QML is actually a lot easier, as we show you in the previous demo, that you can just select an ID of the QML object, that you don't have to traverse into the div within the div and the button and all that, compared to the HTML. QML has an inbuilt style. One of the examples is material design, but for HTML, you would have to add the CSS on top of it. But QML can do the same thing. You don't have to use the inbuilt style, and you can just define your own styling properties. It also has an inbuilt localization support. For example, when you say a text string with the function qstr back, if you have the localization set up, that string will be translated into whatever language it's set to. And Loas mentioned the property binding. So in QML, it comes built in. But in JavaScript, basic JavaScript, you would have to write advanced setting or a lot more code to achieve the same thing. So that's a different. So I like property binding because it's easier to keep your view in sync. I find property binding it's cool. And so AppStudio created this app framework that give you additional support. For example, in JavaScript you can create you can do XML HTTP requests. You can do this in the JavaScript code, but AppStudio provided. Oh, I think AppStudio provided a framework, a QML type, a network request so that you can make a post and get requests. And promises. I think JavaScript API team has introduced you guys with the promises. That is a cool thing that you can do for async tasks in the web. QML doesn't have that, but AppStudio framework created a promises plugin so that you can use promises into the QML as well for your AppStudio app. We have a few more minutes, and we're going to show you a few more demo, and then we're going to open the floor for question.
So I just want to take 1 minute and show you one demo. As a web developer, something I don't want, most of you are web developers, so I don't want you to leave without knowing about network request. Network request is an AppStudio component that you can use it to make HTTP requests. So in other words, you can get the content of a website from a web URL. In this case, this is what the network request component looks like. I am getting this URL, which is a REST call. In this REST call, I am searching for the word Esri. And this is going to return a JSON. Let's look at the JSON on the web. If I open the browser, there. So this is searching, using the ArcGIS REST API to search for the word Esri. And in the code, so take a look at how the network request is made. You specify the URL that you want, and then you specify the method, whether you want a get or a post. And on component on completed, in this event handler, you send your request. I like this component on completed. It's similar to document.ready on the web. The good thing about QML is every object has this event handler. So you know exactly when every object is ready for you to use. And in this case, once it's completed, in this onReady state change, this is telling me that the status of my call. I say when it's ready, then I set the text to request.response text. This is the response text I get from the network request. And I am setting it to this text property right here. So if I run this, you expect to see the JSON that we saw on the web printed in my app. So I will run with Shift-Alt-R there. So if you're writing your app, you can pass this JSON file and use it. And this is an example of, in this sample, I passed the exact network request we just saw, and I am showing the thumbnails in a list view.
All right, that's it. Any question? The question was, how much Qt do you need? The question, you need a lot of Qt. So as much as the HTML you need, the answer to that. But I don't think it's difficult to learn. I think Loa was a web developer before, and he joined the team a couple years ago, right?
Yes, and my background is not computer science. I didn't go to college for computer science, by the way. So most of the part, I taught myself how to code. And I found that picking up QML is relatively easier than the other languages. And you can try it yourself. I invite you to experiment with it yourself.
Any other question? All right, we will be able to, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, we can open the my function.js. We can show it quickly.
It's just one method in that it's not a JavaScript library, it's a one method file that I wrote for this demo. This is what it does. This is the magic.
So it used math.random, which is a JavaScript object. Say it again?
It's not using module, like it's not using like AMD or other.
No, frameworkless. All right. I think the next session is coming in. Thank you for coming. We'll be available in the showcase for any additional question.